In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the word fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our new site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Welcome to Foreign Policy Review. I'm Billy Bob. We have Carlo Parcelli, our co-host, and Dustin Pickering is on assignment today. Our special guest is Don DeBar, and we're very thankful and happy he agreed to come on our program. You know, there's so much going on in the world at the moment. There's so many rapid changes, huge cataclysmic changes taking place. We're going to have a lot to discuss. First off, I wanted to give Don an opportunity to just tell us a little bit about himself and where he comes from politically and what he's done in the world of broadcast. So, Don, if you're okay with just telling us a little bit about yourself, and we can get right into the issues. How are you doing this morning?
I'm well, and how are you doing? Thank you for having me on, Billy and Carlo. I appreciate it.
No problem. You've been involved with you know, helping to inform a very uninformed public. You know, and I'm not up to speed on the specifics. Do you care to just give us a little bit of background of different projects you've been a part of?
Yeah. Well, I guess I mean I've been interested in journalism since I was a kid. My parents thought it was important for me to learn to read as soon as I could absorb it. So they were trying to teach me how to read literally from when my mother was nursing me. By about age 4, I could read. I used to read first the comics and then the newspapers. And where I lived in Irvington, New York, when I was in kindergarten, first grade, up through 5th grade, we lived on a street, a dead-end street that had the delicatessen store on the corner, and then across the street and a couple doors up, a stationery store. And between them, they offered the morning and afternoon and evening newspapers. And at the time in New York, there were like 7 or 8. I can run down the list. New York Daily News, the Daily Mirror, the New York Post, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Journal American, the Herald Tribune, the Sun, and there's another one I'm forgetting. And my father and my mother, between them, wanted all of them. And, you know, by 1st grade, I was reading all of them on a daily basis. Now, I'm 68 years old. I was in 3rd grade for the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example. And I remember, you know, vividly those days, as most people my age do, because we were having air raid drills in the school pretty much on a daily basis for several weeks. And that involved getting up from our desks and going in the hall and huddling down into the corner between the wall and the floor, and with instructions not to look up, because if a nuclear attack happened, this was our best chance to survive. I'm in 3rd grade at that point in time. So I was reading about it, and I understood what the words meant because I had been reading for a couple of years. And one place said one thing, another. It was the same fact pattern, kind of, but a different take on it across the spectrum. I followed the news ever since after that. The civil rights movement, I paid attention to, I understood it. And the anti-war movement, which I also paid attention to, particularly as I approached the age of 18 in 1972, after losing one cousin in 1966 and another in 1969 in Vietnam. And I got active as an anti-war activist, and I got active as an anti-racist activist. And over time, I realized, basically, I found myself trying to organize by writing press releases and trying to get word to people through the media, and learned what kind of problems I would have. In the 1990s, I started trying to organize things locally, and I got involved in 96, 97 at the request of a friend over a cell tower that was going to be installed on top of Ossining High School. Just for perspective, back then, people didn't really know what this technology was going to do when you blanketed the planet with this, signal, this particular signal. And so to a friend of mine who is an MD that practices in town here, he's no Luddite for sure, he thought this was a really foolish experiment to conduct on the adolescents in our town by having the antenna on top of the school. So he asked me to help organize. And we started trying to organize using the media and ran into a huge pile of resistance from the local Gannett Daily and from most of the radio and television news organizations in the area. And the answer to why the resistance was clear on the pages, including the editorial pages of the newspapers and news magazines, and also, again, like News 12 and others. And that was that their advertising dollars were all over the place, from Sprint and ATT and a lot of them. And I understood in a very real sense at that moment exactly what this construct that I've been watching evolve for over decades, what it really meant and how it plays in the real world. In the middle of that, in 1998, there was a proposal to give away a piece of the Hudson River waterfront that was owned by the village, by the people of Ossining, to a developer so he could build luxury condominiums on it that about 80% of the people in the village of Ossining couldn't afford to live in, and to give him a tax abatement to induce this construction in a condition where we had no protection against gentrification like rent stabilization or anything, no law doing that in Ossining. And so we knew what was happening was this whole village which was a working class, originally a blue collar prison town, then working class community that was being slowly gentrified, would rapidly just scrape out the people that were remaining here. Since I grew up here, since I have lots of friends who would be affected even before I would, I tried to organize and did organize against that. And we had, I would say, in a village of 25,000 people, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people over the course of a couple of years come to multiple meetings to try to stop this project, and got thousands and thousands of people to vote on the specific project. And again, getting actual coverage, even the stuff we said, let them interpret it how they want after they quote you, but to actually just report on our side was impossible. And we found out that there was a public relations firm that the developer and the village had jointly hired. I have no idea how they split the budget between them. And that firm consisted of the former editor of the daily newspaper here, the current editor of the TV news channel here, and they were also the largest buyer of ad revenue at both places. And so the developer hired them, of course, and so they managed. The ad firms is connected and respected is their slogan. So I got a handle on how this stuff works. Well, long story, I'm sure it's too late for long story short, I guess, but in the midst of the second battle that we conducted, which took about 8 years, one of the outlets on my distribution list for press releases was radio station WBAI in New York City, which was anyway a lefty liberation station. Basically, it was called the University of the Airwaves, among other things, and it's one of the Pacifica Network's 5 company shops. WBAI in New York, WPFW in Washington, D.C., KPFK in Los Angeles, KPFA in the Bay Area, KPFT in Houston, Texas. And then there are 100 to 200 affiliates that are independent stations that take programming from Pacifica in one way or another. So the people in New York, I listen to the station religiously as an atheist. And one day I get contacted by Bernard White and Errol Maitland and Sharon Louise Harper and Deepa Fernandez. Someone in that group contacted me and said, hey, we see that you're doing a lot of stuff up in the Hudson Valley. We would like to add to our morning show a weekly report from the Hudson Valley, from Long Island, from New Jersey, from Connecticut. We want to know if you would like to do the weekly segment from the Hudson Valley. I said, sure. I'm already doing the research. I was following every development project in the Hudson Valley because, we did things. I just want to, just so you understand my brain works to the extent it does. We were fighting for the cell tower. We were fighting Sprint. Sprint had signed a contract with the school district for $30,000 to put a cell tower, this unknown stuff. It's going to broadcast some unknown radiation stuff on top of where all the adolescents who are most vulnerable, of course, the mutagenic stuff, where they all gather every day for 5-6 hours. So we thought it was a bad idea. We go to the school board and we say, look, here's an MD saying, don't do it. Here's this one, there's that one. And I'm there. My background was in the title insurance business. I know real property contracts and all this stuff as an expert. I mean, I've testified that way in court a number of times. So they brought me along to say, look, if you've already signed it, there's some ways out of this. And so I'm there to help you work through those things or help your lawyer work through those things. They completely ignored us. They said this $30,000 in a school district whose budget was over $100 million meant that they absolutely had to do this. And over time, what we found out was after they signed the contract, all we had to do was get the state to say, you can't alienate school district property for private business. And so they wouldn't approve the contract, so it was void. Sprint sued, went to federal court, and the judge forced the school district, even though they were willing to go, to do the contract. And so I couldn't figure out another way to stop them until I started looking in the want ad sections of all the newspapers in metropolitan New York. And I saw notices of meetings where Sprint was doing all of the hearings to put in all of their cell towers. One of their lawyers had said in court on our case that this is an obligation under our license that we just got from the FCC to build this network. And if we can't install all the nodes that we've had approved, we can't build the network. I was like, oh, really? So I started contacting people at each one of the locations where they were doing this, sending them literature. Here's what some doctors say. Here's a picture, a cartoon of a kid frying, all this stuff. I started organizing people at like a half a dozen of their places. So instead of going into a pro forma meeting with 3, gadflies and the compliant board, they couldn't get into the building sometimes because there were hundreds of people outside with rope, and guillotines and stuff. This is something that was possible at that moment to do that kind of communication, like through platforms that are now replaced, like Facebook and whatever. And it was the whole communications landscape is an integral part of the body politic. And if we can have communication openly, we can protect ourselves from the predator class, the 1%, whatever term you want to use. Their job, knowing that, of course, is to try to thwart that everywhere they can. And so that kind of motivated me to start doing this when I was contacted by the people of Pacifica and asked me to do the first job. That ended up leading to me being the morning news headlines person within like 2 or 3 years. Until the station was taken over by basically the Democratic Party and purged us all out in 2009, 2010. That's what I did. Since then, I've just been generating stuff. We were doing a newscast from 2010, I think October 1st, 2010, until this past April, May. I was doing a 30-minute radio newscast Monday through Friday, covering, international and national stuff. And we were on maybe at the peak, maybe 75, 80 radio stations, independent stations, college stations, etc. And got a lot of other play. And I do political commentary on like Press TV and RT and whatnot. So that's kind of my journalism, whatever.
So that's interesting background, some community activism, and some firsthand experience with, dealing with the censorship and the media monopoly, where they really pick and choose which stories they promote and, what kind of information they give to the general public. It's insidious. It's, I call it a capitalist dictatorship. It's not a democracy, and they use all these institutions, the media, both political parties, the economic policies to further the interests of the billionaire class, the 0.1%, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of community activists that you've probably worked with have a totally different view of foreign policy than you do. So I think most community activists, quote unquote, community activists, are probably embracing the narrative, the Western narrative, vis-a-vis Ukraine and about China and Taiwan. So, how did you come across what I would consider a more informed view of these topics, whereas, most of the people that would be in that circle of community activists, toe the foreign policy line of the State Department? How did you manage to see through the false narratives where many others have not been able to?
Well,
is that a tough question?
You can't see what you're not looking for. People there are as many styles and types of motivation as there are people. A lot of folks are in journalism because it's a career, like being a doctor, lawyer, whatever. It's respectable, middle, upper middle, whatever, imagery, and you let you into the country club. You can talk to important people, star, the F wording, all of that. Some of the few jobs that really pay well also, that has the inducement that goes with it as well. Some people, this we're not born with a knowledge of the the four corners of the reality that we're born into, whether it's our community or nation state, planet Earth, the physical universe, whatever. We don't, we have take in data and process it, and we formulate some sort of a grappling of an understanding with what's outside of us. Most of the things that have to do with with policy in general, the information comes to us, it's already mediated. It's not our firsthand information. I've had the opportunity through just sheer luck, chance, whatever, or bad luck, to actually ask questions of people, Karl Rove, Cynthia McKinney, depending on who, where, what, whatever, and get answers. And so I can state for a fact that when this person asked this, they said that. I see video that, of course, seems to document the same thing, but I have technical skills. I could take the picture of you right now and have you confess to murder or proposition a young boy or whatever, and it'll look to somebody watching it from outside exactly that's what happened. It would be proof. A jury would be swayed by it. So the nature of our reality, the bulk of it, with respect to things like foreign policy, it comes to us, mediated through channels that are heavily controlled by the people who, have control of pretty much everything else. So we're going to talk about what is to be done. We have a very narrow range of things, all of which include leaving that guy's power and money alone and maybe finding a way to fork over a little more of what I have left. That'll be the parameter of the conversation, and then it's a matter of us fighting over whether to wear a red or blue shirt while we do it, and whether we should have an abortion or never have that, and whatever, all this other nonsense. The heart of the matter in public policy has to do with A, who's going to make public policy, and B, towards what end, or for whose purposes.
Yeah.
The methodology of achieving that is not a topic of discussion. We have a ritual that we go through that is supposed to be the expression of democracy or whatever. There's never a discussion of public policy. There's no variation whatsoever on some fundamental policies like war and peace. And there's really not even any heretical utterances that are permitted in the public space. Almost never. I mean, the reason Trump got so much attention, aside from the fact that he was a media creature, for example, was because he uttered some heresies. No one, not a single member of Congress, not a single member of the Senate, not a single president or presidential candidate uttered some of the things that he uttered, outside of people like Cynthia McKinney, Dennis Kucinich, a couple of others who, Feingold maybe on occasion, who, by the way, found their way out of Congress or off the planet by various means. So, people are not used to hearing that come out of somebody who then gets elected president, by the way, whether you like the way the rules work or not, they got him there. And so we have to keep in mind that our entire perception at the foundation of our opinions and our feelings, all of the data that we have has been already like spoon-fed to us one way or another. I don't want to sound like a paranoid psychotic. I'm stating fact. What I know about Vietnam came through a TV screen. What I know about Egypt came through a TV screen. What I know about the war in Russia came through. Now, I've been to Moscow twice. I went once in 1990 and I went once in 2018. I have friends there that I speak with on a regular basis. In fact, for the bulk of the last 11 years, I spoke with Mark Sloboda on a weekly basis for a half an hour about politics. And he's an American that's been in Moscow for that time. I talk with someone in Tehran pretty much every day about, they pull little stories from me for, an American's perspective on different global issues or whatever. In Latin America and in China, elsewhere, I have firsthand contact with people that I either now know or people that I actually knew before. So that doesn't mean I trust that what they say is reality, but I know how to gauge their perception of reality, and I trust that they're relating it to me honestly the same way they did last time. And so I have some windows that are separate from what comes through this box. And I think that helps. Now, most people could have that if they wanted to. If you're watching this and you have Facebook friends, say 200 Facebook friends, and some of them are scattered around the world, having an occasional conversation with them about things doesn't have to be to choose up sides, and doesn't have to be what's your opinion, because chances are their opinion is formulated the same way yours was through their media there. But people see stuff too live in front of them. Is there a flood really in Tehran? Was there really an uprising in Damascus on Tuesday? That kind of stuff. And if you're just, diversifying your sources of information just as part of your daily life, your perspective on what comes out of the box changes too. And you start looking at it more to decode it instead of just absorbing what comes out. So I don't know. That's kind of the way my brain looks at all of this, and whatever you want to call it. That's the way I look at all of this. And that may be the answer.
So you've had more opportunities, so to speak, than the average community activist to be able to hear different sides and different perspectives. And when you compare the narratives, you've come to the conclusion that certain narratives are more sensible and have a more closely described reality, more so than what you get from the State Department or the mainstream media. So, and I think that's really what it is. It's kind of a battle of narratives, but they own the platforms of mass communication, so they have a big advantage in putting out their narrative, and people just believe it because by design we're too busy, we're too apathetic, or we've got better things to do than to figure out, what's actually going on. And I think that does explain a lot of the unfortunate ignorance and people just, imbibing what the mainstream media is selling. Carlo, we haven't let you say anything in a.
Yeah, go, man.
No, it's fine. I'm intrigued. There's some parallels between my experience and what Don DeBar said, and because there's been a radical change in the media that we're able to get our message out on, and this media we're using now has really given us a leg up, and I would say that's a lock because they're really coming at us hard. They're coming at us real hard because they know we have more influence now, given the internet. That's what I'm talking about. Because when I began, and I'll be brief about this, outside of being outraged about the Vietnam War and fighting my draft board for years, when Iran-Contra came about, I linked up with the Christic Institute down here in Washington D.C. and also they started doing something called community access television, where you could broadcast your own show an hour a week. And I said to my wife, who's an artist and was doing video art at the time, I said, "Can we take your editing suite and can we do an hour show?" And she said, "Well, it's not likely. They're not going to let you say this stuff." I said, "But we have our own editing suite, so we have to get editing time from them." And we did it. And we made copies. And since we're in the D.C. area, I'm sure it wouldn't have had much impact in other places. We're in the D.C. area, so we just sent tapes around to the outlying counties and Washington, D.C. that all had community access shows. So every week, we had an hour show right in Washington, D.C., where we read verbatim articles from 77 alternative journals that we got permission to read from. And we would, my friend and I, Joe Brennan and I, we would go down to Common Concerns, which was a bookstore in DuPont Circle, where they offered dozens of these journals, and we pick out the articles we wanted to do for the show that week, and we would do those articles. And that was my first taste. And we also had cameras, video cameras. We linked up with CISPAS, the Community in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, and we did the same thing. And we did it for we ended up doing it for all these Central American groups. So too numerous to name: Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and the whole. Anyway, so we taped those. If say that the military murdered some clergy or some students in El Salvador, they would call an action, and this would call an action, and we would all meet down at the Salvadoran embassy on California Street, and we would tape it. Our responsibility was to tape it. And we would tape it, and we would send the raw tape back to the FMLN, the FSLN, all the groups in Central America fighting U.S. hegemony down there, and we would also do an edited version, and we would broadcast it on our show. And we did it for years, and no one ever said anything to us. And we did it so religiously, to use that term again, that other people got tired of doing their cooking show or their gardening show, and we were basically running 24/7 on this thing because I didn't have anybody else doing it. Yeah. And so people would be stopping me on the street, or I'd walk down the street and people would turn their heads, and I'm going, wow, and some professors began to require their students to watch the television show. Some professors who were not native born Americans, George Washington University, American University, these other places. So it was an eye-opening experience, and I've been wanting to stay in these mediums to try to get my point of view across, because my wife will tell you, if I just stew around the house, I get very frustrated and very, very unpleasant to be around. And I think Don and our experiences conflate there.
Even more than that, I left a big chunk out. 1979, I saw an ad in the newspaper, this thing called public access television. They were looking for producers and stuff. And so I wanted to do this kind of stuff eventually, but I'm a musician, and I was like, oh, wow, I could bring some guys down there. We could record some music, play it on TV, and all that. When I went down there and learned, because if you lived in the franchise area, they had to let you use the equipment. I mean, they used to throttle me. I couldn't take the truck out or anything like some favorite producers, but I could use equipment and I could edit. And so I think I probably aired some of your stuff because I put a lot of stuff involving CISPIS, particularly on the air. And so if that came from you, then that's what I did.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Dan Sheehan and Lanny Sinkin were great to work with.
I guess it's a long time ago for me.
Yeah, a long time.
So anyway, yeah.
So you guys both did some serious community activism, and you both ended up having very superior, views on foreign policy. I kind of see the United States as, the global hegemon of the last several decades, and really they're being threatened by an ascendant China and an ascendant Russia. And so there seems to be a big effort underway right now to, subvert China, subvert Russia, and maintain their, unipolar hegemony throughout the rest of the 21st century. I mean, that is, in a nutshell, what I see the Western strategy is about. It's maintaining their unipolar status. But we have, a lot of people in this country don't appreciate things like that. They get caught up on the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. How is that the US's fault? Russia did that. Russia's the aggressor. Russia's the imperialist. So this week I was definitely dealing with people like that on the Facebook. Any commentary or thoughts on dealing with people that, kind of are very, they give lip service. Oh, I don't like what the U.S. does, but yet they buy into the State Department narratives, and they buy into the demonization of these other societies that are an obstacle to Western imperialism. And so they demonize these countries. They'll give a lip service. Oh yeah, I don't like the U.S. doing that either, but they'll denounce China. They'll denounce, Russia, Iran, Nicaragua, Venezuela. These are terrible places. At least we're not that bad to these people. I mean, what can we tell these folks?
I just want to say, don't we have to go to commercial break?
No, okay. So MUTIU said no commercial break today.
Okay.
So that's what he said.
Great. Perfect. Go ahead.
You want to go first, Carl?
No. You go ahead.
So the you have to proceed from what is it I'm trying to accomplish with what I'm saying, or with with communicating this information. What is it? Do I want to convince people that I know more than you do? Is it that game? Is it to pose a clear argument in front of people, just to do it, to say, well, this is the clear argument. Look at it on the shelf, isn't it pretty, or whatever. The purpose of all of this, the purpose of philosophy, the purpose of journalism, the purpose of all of the work that we do with respect to the world is to change it. And so we have to look at what motivates people. And the only thing that's going to make the world change is, just the internal dynamics of the things that are in motion, obviously, because there's a thing called gravity that brings it down. We're looking at the contradiction that Marx identified in the middle of the 19th century, just that's accelerated over time. They've blown air into the system different ways, Keynesian, economic, whatever nonsense. They've been able to postpone the day of reckoning. The day of reckoning is here. There was a class war. They won. Now what? That's what's on the agenda right now. It seems that the elite, whoever they might be, we don't know their names and addresses. Everybody's got an idea who it is, and swell. You may well be right. To me, this is one of those things that is unknowable to us because they're on the other side of that camera, and they're not. That camera's not on. So whoever it is, though, we know them by their works. We know that there is a small group of people who make policy for the bulk of the world, that they have organized into a large bloc that essentially goes to the borders of Russia and China and, say, the Silk Road or whatever, with some holes in Africa and Latin America, and Asia. And that their intent is they think the way that they can escape this contradiction is to grab the last of the territory that's outside of their reach, that's been outside of their reach, and just squeeze it into oblivion. And then using science, just do away with the dynamic that is central to this system, and really do away with the system and impose a kind of techno-feudalism on the whole planet. I mean, it's clear that that's where this is headed. All of the various architecture of communications, legal, all these different systems all take us right there. The Patriot Act, the all of the things that they've done coordinating the Patriot Act and the Telecommunications Act. I mean, they're 5 years apart, right? Massive changes in the international architecture of communications and in the national architecture of law. There is a repealer of the Bill of Rights, in essence, and then some. And these things are being assembled in front of us as if, I did a conversation yesterday with somebody at Sputnik Radio with Sean Blackman. And I pointed out, it was about the Patriot Act. And it was the anniversary. There was the 21st anniversary yesterday. 26th of October was the 21st anniversary of the Patriot Act. So the Patriot Act is supposedly constructed in response to the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on September 11th of 2001. It was introduced in 132-page, basically repealer of the Bill of Rights, and as I said, it goes further than that. 132 pages, reviewed by like 7 committees in the House, Judiciary, Foreign, International Relations, blah 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 blah, all these different committees, and in one day, it was introduced on the 23rd, voted on the 24th, with only 66 dissents in the House. And then on the 25th, voted on in the Senate, and it was only 1 vote against and 1 abstainer. Okay, and then signed the following day, the 26th, by the president. 132 pages of law, and it went through these committees, all of them very complex legal issues, innovations in American law, innovations in English common law. Okay, things that have not been possible since the Magna Carta. Went through committee like that, okay, in a day. Now, in 1973, U.S. Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade. Since then, I don't know how many years out of the 50 years since, but more than half have seen Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. And then about half, you've had Democratic presidents. I would say in the last 20 years or 30 years, more Democratic than Republican presidents, by a good measure. For some reason, the 1-paragraph piece of legislation that would enshrine Roe v. Wade in federal law has evaded Congress. It's too ponderous for their process, this 1 paragraph. The committees, I guess, are still reviewing it. Nobody's raising a question about this. So you have that going on across the board. There are glaring contradictions like this that no one sees, no one talks about, and people tolerate. And then, as a matter of fact, are easily organized into groups, partisan groups, for one or the other of these positions that are clearly shell games. Now, if you want change, we have to figure out how to address that, effectively. In other words, I could sit down with somebody who holds all these ridiculous opinions, and we can sit actually and mouth what they're saying because we know they got it from watching, Rachel Maddow or, somebody on Fox or somebody on CNN or whatever. And so, here goes that rap, blah, 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 blah. Great. So what? So I'm smarter than you are. I know more than you do. You should just shut the hell up and listen to me. So that doesn't go anywhere. What we have to do, first of all, is give people a framework to understand what they're looking at. I don't know how to do these things, by the way. I'm just telling you, these are like tasks that I see in front of you, so we got to work on. First, you have to find a way, a language, to communicate to people that what you're looking at is a mirage, and you need some basic skills some glasses that will let you see what is actually in front of you. They don't teach philosophy and the difference between, the appearance and essence. They don't teach political science in high school anymore. No civics classes or whatever. And if you're a political science major, even graduate level, half of them, as much as not, they're basically just partisans. They're either being trained for the bureaucracy to function as an assistant to some clerk in a diplomatic office abroad. Oh boy, I get to live in Paris and I get a pension, or worse. And then those few who, are actually looking at the problems facing the world, looking at this training that they have as a tool to help understand and remedy the problem. The ones who are actually very, interested and focused on doing that generally get marginalized in academia. They get thrown out of, so they end up in jail. So there's a big mountain for us to climb up, but we got to go there. That we have to figure out how to get people to understand what they're seeing as a mirage. There are tools that are available to you to understand the world. Grab as many of them as you can and be as kind as you can to the people next to you that are genuinely trying to find these things out also, even if they totally disagree with you. Because together, one of you holds a flashlight and the other one a cane, you might find your way out of the dark and find the answer.
One of the things that also pertains is the legislation you're talking about is actually written by the corporations and entities that will benefit from it. So
they have 535 members of Congress. We don't have any.
Well, and they actually they outsource the writing of that legislation to people who have connections to the corporate elements that, like I say, will benefit from it. It's a rigged game. It's but it's the information. Getting information out of the people sometimes feels to me insurmountable, and I'm not as kind as you are toward people who.
Don, I'm really disappointed. I really thought you were coming with answers today, Don. I thought you were going to have the answers, and we were going to fix this on this program. Yeah, it's a very like you said, they have, was it 535 members of Congress and we have 0. I mean, that's exactly right.
Yeah, that's the school board, man.
But how do you break that news to people and help them to understand that and realize that and appreciate the truth in that statement? That's the challenge. And I think everybody has a different approach and their own skill set, and I think it takes all of us, right? We've got to all just do the best that we know how to do and try and wake people up. And I think the Trump phenomenon to a degree did wake some people up a little bit to certain aspects of reality that they didn't appreciate before. And everybody, I'm the only one that really understands everything perfectly. And so
me too.
Right. That's kind of how we think. But
I'm sorry.
No, go.
You asked a question about what to do, actually. History doesn't have direct answers, but it suggests some, because things happen in a complex, and you see how all these parts, moshed together came out, and what happened in the aftermath, and how people interpreted it going in and out. At the end of World War I, actually in towards the end of World War I, in the midst of it. The conditions of working people and peasants in Russia became intolerable. There had been attempts, earlier in 1905, for example, at a revolution, because there were some difficulties then. There were people who thought that they could manage and, to conduct and whatever, induce the revolution and whatever. What was successful was the effort that was led by people who understood that the situation was going to be intolerable. And at that point, people were going to be looking for answers. And they identified the three most urgent problems facing pretty much three different, although overlapping, constituencies. There was hunger, and there was the fact that people had no land. They were, serfs, basically, even in the cities in one way or another. And this war that was raging around them. And so they held up three signs. It said bread, land, and peace. And when people went into the street, and when the society was collapsing around them, people that were hungry stood in front of the sign that said bread. People that needed land, needed freedom, needed all of that, stood in front of the land sign. And people that were war weary and had enough stood in front of the peace sign. Next thing you know, there's a nation practically there. There's a huge number of people there, and they're all ready now to follow. We have to kind of look at what it is, where is it that people are really being hurt? I don't mean their feelings. I mean objectively. The things that as they mature suddenly become intolerable. I can't feed my kids. I'm living in the street. I can't afford my medication and I'm going to die. Things like they're blowing stuff up, up the street from me. Whatever these things are, and they're all kind of presenting at the same time here. I mean, we've been, looking, I would say, they talk about, well, gee, it's almost 40 years since they started imposing austerity. Stagflation was, one of the first real volleys of hardcore austerity. That was Gerald Ford, who was president then, in 1975. Okay, that's 47 years ago. It's only gotten worse. It's compounded. Again, going back to Marx, you have this dynamic, in essence, where because they can't extract more and more and more value to the ridiculous infinity degree out of everything, they have to take what is and both more broadly and more deeply exploit it. And so that involves even with technology, I don't want to get too complicated in economics, but you have these guys need to make more and more money. Okay, so I can only work 24 hours a day as an employee with a hammer and a nail in my hand. We build a machine now; it does the work of 5 guys. I can work 10 hours a day now, and this guy's making 5 times as much money. There's a point where you have the law of diminishing returns kicks in. You can't extract any more value from that process. So I have to go get more places where I do it and more people that I do it to and all of that. And that's at the heart of this. And when you run out of those, it goes boom, like that. We're kind of at that point. Now,
they're
what's going to be, I don't know. But we've got millions of people in foreclosure and eviction in the United States. That's been true since 2009, 2008. You've got, I don't know how many millions of people that not just have bogus health insurance. Yeah, all I have to do is pay the first $300,000, and then they'll give me $100 for aspirin. That's not insured, in my opinion. We have millions of people that are not insured, including seniors who require health care in order to stay alive. Almost every front, people are food challenged now. We're going into the winter time. I don't know about you. They sent me a note, Con Edison, 2 months ago, telling me my bill is going to go up 27% for electricity and 32% for gas. And that's what they were telling me 2 months ago. We're getting to a point where it's going to be, speaking of political science, my friend and one of my mentors, I hope he's not insulted by that, Professor Tony Montero, he points out to me, regularly that, you have a revolutionary precondition when the rulers can no longer rule in the old ways, and the ruled will not be ruled in the old ways. These things just don't function anymore. And so it creates, a condition of vacuum or whatever, for something new to come into existence. I think I have a sense that we're close to that. And I think we're going to see that actually happen in weeks in Europe, in a number of places. You're seeing marches in Prague and Paris and Italy and, all over the place.
I think Europe would be very happy to get your 27% and 32% increase. They're getting like a 300% increase. Crazy stuff.
I'm saying what they told us. We don't know yet.
You're right. That could change. I think definitely Europe is getting the worst off of the economic war. They're really paying the price. The capitalists are good at being inventive and finding new ways of commodifying things that before they didn't commodify. And now, basic needs, they commodify the basic needs. And these days, it's like medication, right? People get burnt out at how society is, and their dopamine levels go down. So hey, just take this medication; it'll make you feel better. So they're commodifying on our happiness.
Yeah.
It's and that's a new form. And so I'm not sure how long, like you said, this can continue before people have had enough. But I think in the imperial core, they're smart enough to realize they've got to placate us to a certain extent. They don't have to placate the people in Ukraine. They don't have to placate the people in Haiti. Those people, they get the black boot to their throats. But they understand that they have to keep some of us okay, and we're going to be the last country. Marx thought revolution would happen in the most advanced industrialized countries, and it turned out to be the opposite. Like you said, people really have to hit rock bottom before they're feeling like they got nothing to lose and revolution is going to take place. And it seems like, the West and the United States in particular is going to be the last place on earth to feel revolutionary. Not to mention the indoctrination that we've all endured, making us, hey, revolution is bad. Well, not revolution is bad, but, communism is bad, socialism is bad, Marxism is bad. To overcome those things seems difficult, insurmountable. We're gonna be dragging humanity back for decades to come. We're gonna be pulling humanity in the wrong direction while everybody else is trying to progress. It's gonna be this country and the people here, I'm afraid, that are gonna be slowing progress down due to that cradle to grave indoctrination we've all had to deal with, and the fact that they're so wealthy and powerful, they can just keep printing money and placating us to a degree. Not like where life is good, but to where people don't want to lose everything. I don't know. Those were kind of my thoughts about your commentary, but maybe Carlo has some. I always throw it to Carlo when I
really don't have anything that would contradict what both of you said. I mean, I fundamentally agree with it. My concern is, but Billy Bob well knows, is all of this upheaval will have to go through a fascist stage, and that is my major concern. This notion that Steve Bannon has of a white Christian world, that I find elementally disturbing, just on the level of naked violence, not to mention any kind of manifestation of that taking real power. Just the naked violence it suggests, I find upsetting, especially among this is so obvious, minorities in this country. So that's the only thing I would add. That there's an ugly phase developing in Europe and the United States that people are taking advantage of.
Two things. One, just invoking the commodification idea. These people have commodified not just everything else, or happiness even. It's a good point. They've commodified political forms, and for example, Nazism. These people can install Nazis here, social democrats there, king here, People's Republic here, all of which belong to them. But it's a face, it's a label, it's a trademark, it's an icon that suits the market for the moment. Now, we saw this happen in the post-World War II period, where in places like Iraq, around the third world, in Africa, Asia, and Europe too, by the way, Western Europe. Depending on the local circumstances, there was an official brand of socialism, for example, that was permitted. In the Scandinavia, they didn't shed their royalty, but they were socialist. In Iraq, you had the Ba'ath Party, and also in Syria. They were tied to different nationalist movements, the Pan-Arabism, for example. For a while, Egypt and Syria and Iraq were going to be, the United Arab, whatever the hell it was called. I forgot what it was called. That got broken up. But this was permitted. This kind of socialism, for example, was permitted because, A, it was outside of the geopolitical socialist structure. Socialism in Iraq did nothing to strengthen the socialist bloc. It was a way of placating the population and allow at least limited exploitation of Iraq's oil and gas and stuff by Western oil companies. After a while, this dynamic that, again, I'm referring to that Marx described, required them, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when there was no longer any need to pretend on a global stage, they just scraped them out of the way. They hung them, they stuck bazookas up their behind, whatever they needed to do. And so, we have fascism for decades that makes what you perceive of what people portraying Bannon or whatever the hell he really is, that looks like, like a kindergarten game. They kill millions of people around the world. It's one thing to have Islamophobia as, like, say, Trump, for example, or whatever. It's another to just murder a couple of million Arabs or Muslims for the real reason that they're stirring up Islamophobia over here and God knows what else over there, so we can get their oil and steal their stuff. And the Bannon may be a less polite version of it, but it's no more intensive, and as a matter of fact, is perhaps to a degree less dangerous because it's more obvious. People seeing that are motivated to resist it. Whether they can or not is another matter. But we got, what was Barack Obama? Barack Obama installed AFRICOM in Africa. He killed the major Pan-Africanist on the continent who wanted to bankroll an African currency and all this other stuff. Nixon couldn't have done that, to paraphrase Mike Mansfield. Who could have? Bush couldn't do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot, there's a lot of partisan, red blue stuff that it gets in our head. Bannon is a good, demon to look at. He's a good image to hold out there. I've met him. He's another one I've met, and I listened to him talk for like a half an hour. I talked to him for a little while. I'm not into any of that whole concept. We were watching. I just heard from Ed Valdai, President Putin, and he was giving a history of Russia and how people perceive of Russia and the nationalities, like going back 1,500 years and all. And, people spend way too much time focused on that stuff, in my opinion. Now, I understand he's at war. Maybe that's why he has to do it. But here, when people argue over whether to wear a dashiki or a hood, a white hood, they're talking about something else besides, who is this guy stealing my stuff and killing us? And I think if we don't focus on this real problem that we have, these other problems are real too. If you're on the wrong end of the Ku Klux Klan, or if you're on the wrong end of any one of the groups, that they come in every size, color, and shape. Understanding, I know the history here, but we have some business to take care of with whoever it is that's got their hands on the levers of power, and time is short.
You mentioned Montero. I'm trying to have him come on. He does the Saturday morning school, right?
Tony Montero. Yeah, it's Saturday Free School. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that. He's got some great insights. So yeah, we're hoping to have him on one of these weeks.
We did. One of the things I was talking about when we were saying about going to see stuff for yourself, I made a point, and this is advice for anybody that's interested in doing this. You know, there are things you can go to and see in person. I made a point of going to the conventions in 2008 and 2016, and covering them both. But more importantly, I wanted to be there because you have the TV show, and then you have what's actually going on there. And particularly in 2016, they were way different. Way different. Tony Montero was with me. That's why I brought this up. But I knew things about that election that people watching TV didn't know. One of which was I knew at the Democratic convention that Sanders, no matter what he said, was ever going to get Sanders voters to vote for Hillary Clinton. And there's a lot of things like that just having some real world contact can help you get your feet on the ground.
I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to say one more thing about Bannon, and that is, we've discussed on this show a number of times, this ski-on of wanting to link MAGA up with Marxism. And, of course, Steve Bannon and Michael Flynn and Donald Trump would play key roles in that kind of a alliance. And I have my fundamental concerns about it. So that's really what I was expressing when I brought up Bannon. So
we have more time. I'd love to discuss that. We have some more time to develop it. It's topic.
Unfortunately, we're only an hour long.
Yeah. So the producers wanting to get us to wrap it up. We got a hard break after an hour. Don, if you want to hang out after the show, we can talk a little bit more. I'm not sure what your schedule is like. But everybody, thanks for joining us. Shanika, thanks for coming in. It was I understand you were a little bit late. You can always watch the recorded broadcast on the YouTube link. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Thanks, Don, for coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That's the producer's cue to cut the show.
I have the text here. I saw it. That's why I ducked out of the other thing.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored.
Oh, there we go.
I guess he cut the...
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote